All right, good stuff. I love that video. I think the whole thing, it probably didn't cost that much to shoot either, but it's a great video. Wall of Voodoo, Mexican radio. And then Stan Ridgway also has a great song called Just Drive, She Said. It's about a taxi driver who picks up a gorgeous woman who's just committed some heinous crime. It's really good. He has stories. A lot of his stories are very evocative, story song type things. All right, well, let's get into the story of the Supreme Court, everybody. And you got it. We're going to go straight over to the news notes and check things out. The Liberty Conspiracy News Notes for the Genetically Superior. Here we go with the negative X-ray image of Karl Marx. The quote from Frederick Bastiat: "Government is that great fiction by which everyone tries to live off of everyone else." I'm paraphrasing. And oh, before I do this, I want to open with something delightful. The Willy Wonka and the Charlie Chocolate Factory. Actually, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll save that for a little bit. Let's get to the Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court rules against the Trump order to end birthright citizenship. So this is from Al Jazeera. So here we go. U.S. Supreme Court rules against Trump order to end birthright citizenship. Donald Trump is not happy. Now, I'm going to give you the Al Jazeera coverage. Then I want to show you a little bit of the Supreme Court SCOTUS blog, and I'll show you where I think there are some problems with some of this. I already mentioned a little bit about this, on how this is taken as being part of the argument about immigration when it's not, because they think, well, if we can say that someone is not a born citizen, then therefore we can deport them. The two shall not meet, according to the Constitution. Naturalization is a power so-called granted to the feds under the Constitution, while immigration, the word is not in there. So I hope people will stop conflating the two. But you can see it was a 6-3 ruling, and it was a major blow, according to Al Jazeera, to Donald Trump. It affirms nearly all infants born on U.S. soil automatically become citizens. All right. Very clear. It's very simple, very easy. As Sheftel would say, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled against Donald Trump's order to end birthright citizenship for all individuals born in the U.S. Now, some people might say, well, maybe what was at stake here was that he just did this through executive order and that it should be done through congressional statute. That's where Brett Kavanaugh came down on this. Although he voted with the majority, he had a separate, and by the way, this opinion was over 200 pages long. I only read portions of it, but if you read the right portions of it, you can definitely understand what certain people are saying for the majority. And Kavanaugh had a separate opinion where he said, I'm agreeing with the majority. However, I think that the Congress can write a statute that would make it such that the 14th Amendment birthright citizenship could be reinterpreted according to statute, which is absurd and dumb and stupid to say. All right. Okay. Because the 14th Amendment is very clear. But he said you can't do it through executive order. The others in the majority in this 6-3 ruling said essentially that the 14th Amendment is clear. If you're born to foreigners in any of the states have jurisdiction, the child is a citizen. And that's what it is. It's like I said, if people think that the states don't have jurisdiction, the only people over whom the states don't have jurisdiction are diplomats, okay? If they think that the states don't have jurisdiction, then I challenge them to walk into any of their state penitentiaries and say that there aren't foreigners who have ever been imprisoned in their state penitentiaries. Because very clearly, if a foreigner commits a crime inside the state, that foreigner, unless extradited to the foreign country, will be prosecuted by the state for breaching the state statutes. The state has jurisdiction over that person. That's why they put them in prison. And you can look it up. And right now there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of people who are foreigners who are inside state prisons right now in the United States. It's just the way that it is. The 6-3 ruling represents a major blow, as they said, to Trump and his efforts to transform U.S. immigration policy. Upon taking office on January 20th, right off the bat, Trump signed an executive order seeking to bar those born in the U.S. to parents on temporary legal status or without documentation from automatically receiving U.S. citizenship. Okay, now, I want to turn to some people who typically I agree 100% or 99% with these guys, but I do disagree with them on this. Let me show you what's on the news notes if you want to look at the roadmap here. Here's DD Geopolitics and their announcement over on X. This is linked up. A January 20th, 2025 motion by Donald Trump issued Executive Order 14160 titled the Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship Executive Order. The order provided that children born in the United States of parents who are foreigners were not protected, essentially. Who are unlawfully or temporarily present are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and thus do not qualify for citizenship under the 14th Amendment. Again, it is these subject to the jurisdiction of the states, not the United States government in Washington, D.C. The Supreme Court ruled today that the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship to children born in the United States, in any of the states, to parents who are also unlawfully or temporarily present in the country. Of course, it doesn't say anything different than that. So I want to go over, whoops, sorry about that. We're going to the wrong one. Going to take that out. There we go. All right, now I want to go back over to this and show you where Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul had this to say over on Rumble today.
They passed the 14th Amendment, which so they obviously were here. They had been here. They had children here. They were denied citizenship. So in 1868, they passed the 14th Amendment, which, among other things, declared that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Now, the sticking point has always been this phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, there's constitutional scholars that are way better than myself, obviously, but the implication that a lot of people see in that phrase is that it requires something more than just physically being born on the soil. Subject to the jurisdiction is an extra step, according to some, and I think it makes sense.
Okay, so now this is where we start to deviate because this isn't complicated. This is not complicated at all. The states have statutes. Those statutes are based on what is allowed by the Constitution that is not enumerated to the federal government and reserved solely to the federal government, and that does not conflict with the federal government or the amendment process like the Bill of Rights and so on afterwards. The states are free to pass those statutes. So, for example, the First Amendment says Congress shall pass no law abridging the freedom of speech, practice of religion, journalism, so on and so forth, freedom of association. Congress shall pass no law. That delineates Congress from the states, and so therefore, until after the Civil War, many states did have speech statutes on their books. They had statutes for curfews. They had, as I've mentioned a number of times over the past month, states like New Hampshire and others offered money to seminaries, and they still have it in the New Hampshire Constitution. So the distinction here is it's very clear. Under the jurisdiction thereof means under the jurisdiction of the state in which the child is born. You can't be any more simple. It's any simpler. It's very, very basic. And to try to draw it out and say, well, perhaps if they're not legally here, again, that presupposes that the federal government can have some determination as to whether or not someone can be legally in the so-called United States. There's nothing in the Constitution that allows that. They have naturalization powers. In Congress, they don't have immigration powers. They can't stop somebody from another country coming into any of the states. As Jefferson and Madison said in 1798, that is up to the states. So all of this is up to the states. It's very clear. It doesn't take much. This is where Brett Kavanaugh is leaving room in a very incorrect way. And this is where I disagree with Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul here, because this is very, very clear in my eyes. And I think it's indisputable. It's very clear. If the word immigration is not in the U.S. Constitution, they can't put up any impediments to say, well, the states don't have jurisdiction over these people. The federal government has jurisdiction over these people. It makes them illegal on the federal side. So therefore, the states can't do anything. The states have every power over this. They have the immigration power and they have the jurisdictional power. Beyond that, naturalization, the feds can decide what people will be citizens or not if they're not born to people who are inside one of the states. That's all, because the 14th Amendment is the one area where it says despite the fact that we give Congress naturalization power in the 14th Amendment, we are stating explicitly that anybody born in any of the states is an automatic birthright citizen. Now, all the rest of this stuff regarding welfare and all these other things, that's not part of it. It's just the question of, if you're born here, are you a citizen? Yes, you are.
Sense. If you go to the next one, in recent decades, conservatives, immigration restriction advocates, and President Trump have advanced a narrower reading. They argue that, quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof requires a deeper form of political allegiance or domicile, essentially limiting automatic citizenship to children of U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. In short, the law was chiefly meant for freed slaves and their children, and that extending it to children of undocumented immigrants creates, quote, anchor babies, encourages illegal immigration and birth tourism, and imposes costs on the country.
Okay, so let's just get to this point. Those are all consequentialist determinations. Some people might like that. Some people might not like that. Again, this is tragedy of the commons. If you're adding all these incentives for people, well, of course they're going to come over for this. But that doesn't change the fact that they can do it under the rules of the Constitution. The ends don't justify the means. If you want to try to stop so-called anchor babies, you don't misread the Constitution to get where you want to go, right? Because then you can misread the Constitution to do anything you want. Why have a Constitution, right? Again, why have it written down? Why do they bother doing that and including an amendment process if you can just disregard the whole thing? It makes no sense. You know, I remember in high school when I heard about Alexander Hamilton claiming that there were implied powers. I mean, what a bunch of nonsense. Dude, you either have enumerated powers or you don't. You don't have implied powers. That means anybody can pretend if they've got enough people. Of course, all of statism is implied powers for whoever determines how they're going to set up the government, and they'll make it up themselves. But at least those people said, we're going to write it down, and for the other people who come in future generations to usurp other people's rights, at least we'll put up some barriers. Now, let me just show you the text of the 14th Amendment, because we've done this a number of times on the show. It's been very fruitful, and it's worthwhile to go through it again, just very, very quickly, just to give you some information on it so we can get the text, okay? So we're going to go to the Constitution annotated. Don't need the annotations, just need the Constitution, because oftentimes the annotations lead people in the wrong direction. Oh, look at this. 14th Amendment, Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Okay. So again, this is United States plural, not singular, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. There you go. You're done. That's all. And despite the fact that I respect those guys a lot, they start to go out and go and deviate. And so does Thomas Massey.
That makes, I think, sense.
You know, this, I think most people can understand the diplomatic exception because, you know, they're here on diplomatic. Yeah. We know exactly who they're under the jurisdiction of the country that they come in. And so they're a legitimate visitor and none of them sitting up and saying, well, we're on the soil. And they're trying to declare, people would laugh at that. They don't pay any attention.
Yeah.
But I think what also happens here in a system where democracy, which is a word I don't like, the democratic process, you got to have everybody voting and everybody doing it, everybody participating, and the system is designed that if you can get. And you're not talking about 100 people coming in illegally and getting to vote. We're talking now about millions, tens of thousands, if not millions of people who do come. And so therefore the driving force of democracy, everybody has everything. And yet the founders didn't deal with that word because they didn't even believe in it. The
Yeah.
only time they talked about democracy is watch out, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's this obsession that the democracy issue here at home is one thing, but when it is an advance for immigration and everything else, the more the merrier. And then all of a sudden it becomes a political issue. And some people, it's amazing, how they can signal that out and allow some people to vote and other people not. And like voter ID.
Yeah.
Just think of the voter ID, the nonsense.
Now, let me pause here because you can see inside this thing, this is just all within a basket of collectivism. People talking about anchor babies associated with that, welfare, right? Collectivism, right? Education. Oh, they get to go to the schools. Collectivism, right? Voting, collectivism. Everything that causes dissension about this has something to do with the forced collective. And everybody's got their different opinions. Well, I don't want the money going to these people for this reason, but I think it's okay for this. I like infrastructure, so that's okay. But what if the infrastructure goes over to a neighborhood that's mostly migrants? Well, I think it should go over to the tech area, whatever. It's just incredible. Like Eric and I were discussing last night, it's incredible how people will claim that they're for freedom, and yet they will start to shave off their principles of freedom to say, well, in order to get to this destination within the collective, I think I'm going to push this way. And they adopt collectivism. It's like, stop doing that. Just have some principles. Stick with it. Don't tell your neighbor that you are going to force them to police an immigration police state, because now you're the aggressor, you're the invader into their lives, not the person who's coming from another country to go work on an apple orchard. They're not bothering that other person. Now, if somebody's going to argue about welfarism, then remember, of course, that welfarism is immoral and unethical for every recipient to receive and for every person who wants to give it to somebody to take from their neighbor. It doesn't matter where they're coming from. Doesn't matter whether they're born as anchor babies and their parents are there or not. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how sketchy it seems, because the origin of it is the taking of the money. So it doesn't make a difference if it's going to a public school or if it's going to a sports facility or if it's going to a migrant to pay for his laundry in New York City. None of it makes a difference. The outcome doesn't matter. It's the taking that matters. So these people are all frustrated. Well, I don't like this part because I'm getting sick of these people getting this. Like, have you looked at the money and where it's coming from? Can you address the source of the immorality? Because at this point, it's going to be a panoply in the future. It's an infinite text. It just keeps going and going with another type of recipient that's going to pop up. Unless people recognize, I don't have a right to force my neighbor to pay for a police force, regardless of what I think it's going to do. Because then I'm the aggressor. Period. Done. It's so stupid. It is the dumbest argument probably in the United States, except for war, is the immigration thing. It's so ridiculously dumb. And then next to that is public schooling. And let's get to this. Now, transgender, you got it, my friends. The transgender bans in public sports. Yes, the Supreme Court also ruled on upholding transgender bans in female sports. But what do they mean by female sports? Here's RT on this one. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that states can forbid biological males from competing as females in school and college sports. U.S. President Donald Trump hailed the ruling as a, quote, big win. In a unanimous verdict on Tuesday, the court's 9 justices concluded that state bans on transgender athletes competing in female sports do not violate Title IX, a 1972 law forbidding sex-based discrimination in education. Okay, now again, the keys here are Title IX is an addition, essentially, that they brought in the 70s to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. They bring it in 1972, and it has a massive effect on colleges. Like I said, if you go to the Grove City Hillsdale College dispute, they got hit with violating Title IX. Why? Because Hillsdale and Grove City College, Hillsdale in Michigan, Grove City in Pennsylvania, very small schools, private schools, they accepted students who got federal loans. The Fed said, hey, you don't have equal numbers of men's and women's sports. Therefore, you are infringing, you were abrogating Title IX of the 64 Civil Rights Act, which was the addition to it. So Hillsdale said, well, we can't do this because nobody comes to the women's games. We can't afford it. So that's why we don't do it. They're like, well, yeah, we're the federal government. Even though we didn't start the college, we're going to tell you how to run it. So you better do what we say, because this is, land of the free. Oh, thanks. That's really nice. So Hillsdale and Grove City lost in the Supreme Court in the early 1980s or late 70s. And they said, okay, from this point on, we won't take anybody who, we won't take the original argument was, if you take federal grants from the school, if the school itself takes federal grants, they said, you've got to conform. So the Hillsdale said, we won't take any federal grants. Grove City, we won't take any federal grants. Then the feds came back and said, if you have students that get federal loans or federal subsidies or anything like that, Pell Grants, then you've also got to conform. So that's when Hillsdale started its own trust. They don't take any students who get federal college loans or anything, because that is the string that attaches and wraps around Hillsdale. So that way they're much more independent. So Title IX pertains to any entity that gets government funds. Private entities are not part of this ruling. So here you go. This is from Brett Kavanaugh. The Constitution and Title IX do not require an overhaul of women's and girls' sports throughout America, wrote conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who authored the ruling. Forcing women and girls to compete against males would, quote, deny equal opportunity to female athletes because, as all agree, females and males have inherent physical differences. The court's 3 liberal justices agreed that the bans do not violate Title IX, but argued that they violate the Constitution's 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection under the law. In her partial dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor quibbled that the ruling applied to, quote, a diminished view of equal protection in women's sports. So again, the provision of something is not protection. So if the state is proferring something and beneficently giving something to someone, it's coming from somebody else. There's no possible way that the state can give to everybody equally. And the 14th Amendment is not equal provision of something. It's equal protection under the law. So supplying a sports team at a government-run college or a government-run high school is not equal protection. It's equal provision. So she is misreading the 14th Amendment. This is very strict. Now, I'm going to be interested to see how this shakes out for private schools that don't receive any government money. But so many of them do that this is going to apply to pretty much all colleges, all high schools, and local public schools. Okay? Just to let you know, whether it's state or federal money, this is going to have an application. So there you go. Just wanted to give you that information. The ban on transgender is not, according to the justices on the court, unanimously, is not something that will, the distinction between men and women is not something that the government can say, we will enforce and make the schools accept men who are pretending to be women. They're saying they don't have to do this. It's not an infringement of men pretending to be women. They're not included in Title IX. They're men, essentially. And under the 14th Amendment, women are not being protected equally according to some of these other people. So therefore, it's also the states don't have to provide this. Okay? So this is very interesting because transgender people could say, well, you have to provide this to us, but they're not going that direction. So that's from the Supreme Court right now. Those are 2 big issues that I think are important. And I want to go back once more to, again, this birthright citizenship issue, because this is going to be the one that really gets people angry. And I just spelled it out as efficiently as possible today on X. I said, Not only is it obvious that the 14th Amendment grants citizenship to babies born in any state, jurisdiction of the states is obvious, since many foreigners have been charged with crimes in states, prosecuted, and are imprisoned in those states. Well, the matter of naturalization is conflated here with immigration, and the word immigration is not in the U.S. Constitution. So even if the court found differently, ruling against birthright citizenship, the feds are not authorized with any so-called policing power over immigrants to then target and deport them. That is a state matter, as Jefferson and Madison noted in 1798. Please feel free to contact me if you would like to appear on my program to offer a counter assessment. I hope to teach as many people as possible about this information. Some of the few who know the legal and ethical layout are at the Future of Freedom Foundation. Check out Jacob Hornberger's new book on immigration and freedom of association for more. So there you go. So hopefully that's a good front section of the program. Want to check your comments, and then we're going to go over to the war stuff, because there's a lot developing regarding Iran and Ukraine, Russia, with these drone attacks, as Putin is going to have to put things into gear. So let me know if you think, let me see. Nostra's in the house. We're going to go with Nostra first. Immigration is state powers. Correct, Guard. Yep. And, you know, it's like I said, Nostra, people get really angry at me when I say this stuff. I mean, literally, I almost had one guy punch me when I was at a gathering one time. I'm like, dude, I'm just telling you the way it is. You can hit me as many times as you want. It's not going to change the words in the Constitution. You can turn my body to pulverized meat, and you're still going to lose. It doesn't matter. It's not like I'm trying to be intellectually superior. I'm just saying what's there. You know, it's like, look, let's say some kids are playing marbles, right? And one of the marbles goes down like one of those like ground hornet holes. It's like, hey, those are ground hornets. And the marble's down in the ground hornet hole. I'm not making that up. It's just the way that it is, right? It's so amazing. Yep. Yeah, and Smuhosky says, I disagree with a lot, but it's definitely a state power. Right. And you know, the other thing about that's so important there is it was manifestly seen that it was a state power. Like I said, there were Supreme Court cases. So check this out, as you know, and you know, I've said this before, but it's in my book in Live Free or Die. But there was, inside the Constitution, the Congress is given the tariff power. However, states can impose tariffs. If you do look in Article 1, states do have the power to impose tariffs, but they have to get permission from Congress first. And it's just something that has led to disputes. When there have been disputes, and so, for example, there was a Massachusetts dispute over this that led to the Supreme Court in the 1800s. That I think was called the Milne decision, M-I-L-N-E. The state of Massachusetts imposed a tariff on a shipper, a ship's captain, who was bringing paupers into Massachusetts. And so the Massachusetts government was charging those people who were bringing migrants in, because they said, this is going to increase our policing expenses. So we're going to charge you. I mean, it was a fraudulent and transparent argument that was really a dumb argument. But that's what they said. That got to the Supreme Court. Never in the Supreme Court up until 1875 did anybody ever question that if the state wanted to prohibit those people, they could. It was just a matter of, can the state charge money as a tariff for the importation of those people? That's all. I mean, this happened more than once. Tony says, Guard is like 6'4". If he had my attitude, he would rage. Yeah, Tony, we'll have you come on. I know we got to contact each other. I've just been so busy. I just want to appear on the show, Guard. Yeah, Tony, we'll get you in, man. We'll get you in. Absolutely. And Front Porch is there. What would a female or transhuman AI design implants be? The cyborg thing is real. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Anchor babies are the new baby boom, says Front Porch Media. Yeah, well, they're definitely incentivizing it, right? Just like they incentivize welfare mothers to have more babies up until the Clinton administration was basically driven by Newt Gingrich's Congress to stop that sort of thing. You know, the more babies they had, the more welfare they got. They incentivized that too, right? So yeah, it's troubling because unfortunately people can pick and choose the different things that they don't like as the effect of the collectivist policy, but oftentimes they don't address the concept of collectivism itself. And so it's a perpetual problem. They just will continue to run into these problems.